Well, hello everyone. My name is Tulani Bridgewater, and I am here with the Wolfer Live from Los Angeles. And I am absolutely ecstatic to welcome Drew Dixon to today's conversation. Drew is someone whose work I have admired for many, many years. She was heading up A&R for Def Jam as well as Arista. Worked with some of the most legendary artists in not only hip hop and R&B and soul, but also what we consider kind of our pantheon artists, people like Aretha Franklin. So Drew has also been featured in a current documentary series that is up on HBO Max entitled On the Record, which we will discuss here as well. And then we're going to talk more with Drew about what's going on with her now and where she's going in the future. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Drew Dixon to today's talk.
Thank
Hi,
you
Drew.
for having me. Thank you.
So I know I was fangirling over you a little bit before we started, and I think it's only fair to say that you've had a tremendous impact, I think, on the majority of women, but also everyone in the music business, especially for us behind the scenes people. So I think a lot of folks get kind of over focused on the people that they see on the stage and the voices coming through the speakers, but they don't realize how instrumental people like you are in crafting those careers. So I would love if you could just kind of bring people up to speed on what you were doing and what A&R really means, because most folks just don't know.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I'm grateful to just have a platform and to be remembered and, asked even anything about my journey because for 22 years, I just had buried the whole entire thing. So this is all still surreal to me that I'm even seen and remembered. So thank you. Yes, I did A&R. So, well, before I did A&R, I answered phones, which is how we all start. So, for about 18 months, I answered phones at 3 different companies. And then ultimately, I got my dream job as I envisioned it at the time, which was making rap records for Def Jam. I came to New York in 1992 intentionally because I wanted to make rap records. I believed I had an ear. And I was always the kid with the mixtape that was like 18 months ahead of the curve. And I loved hip hop. I thought it was sort of like this amazing art form that sort of gave a voice to the voiceless and just didn't play the respectability politics game. It honored sort of the swag and authenticity of Black people. And I just loved it. And I wanted to be a facilitator. And A&R really is a fancy word for kind of talent scout slash facilitator. It stands for artists and repertoire. It comes from like the 30s, 40s, 50s when you signed Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, Billie Holiday, and they were the artists, and then you told them all to sing All of Me or My Way, and they all kind of sang the same standards. So the A&R person found the artist and the repertoire, and then with rock music that changed, the artists made their own music. So A&R stuck as a term, but really became more about finding the artist and then getting out of their way and facilitating the process. So I did A&R at Def Jam and later at Arista in both ways. I did A&R for people like Whitney Houston and Aretha Franklin, where it was the old school find the songs. So I found songs for them. And I also did A&R with people like Method Man and Q-Tip, where it was more like rock and roll A&R, where you sign the artist and then, or you inherit the artist in the case of Method Man, and then you sort of just kind of fall back. So, and try to be a sounding board. So that's A&R, and that's what I did, and I loved it.
Well, and you were tremendously successful in it. And I think you also had a gift for it because it's not something that everyone can do to be able to hear artists and immediately connect them either with other songwriters or material that you've heard or other artists and producers and kind of get them positioned so that they can be their most successful selves really is a talent unto itself. And there's a certain demanding creativity that goes into that,
Yeah.
particularly, I think, when you're talking about a genre like hip hop, which when you were coming up in it was not yet being seriously considered an art form or even art at all. And people thought it was just going to disappear and dissipate into the ether. So,
Yeah, when I got to Def Jam, there was no Grammy category for rap music. I mean, it was not clear at all that, to quote Biggie, hip hop was going to take it this far. It was not at all a foregone conclusion that this wasn't going to be like disco or something that would just kind of come and go. And yes, not everybody can hear. I mean, that's how they describe it in the music industry. You can hear or you can't hear, which means you can hear a hit. Not everyone has ears. I had ears, and it's like a sixth sense, and I can tell when somebody else has it, and you're kind of like, oh, it's the way you listen to a record. It's the way you see a star. I can't explain it. I knew Biggie was a star when he was hanging out and rhyming in our backyard in Brooklyn. I knew Lauren was a star when she asked me to, like, on the floor of the Hit Factory, listen to The Sweetest Thing. I mean, I knew she was a star actually years before that. I knew that the record that became You're All I Need to Get By, the duet with Marion Meth that I, A&R'd, was destined for greatness when it was just an interlude, and I heard it and it just gave me like goosebumps, and I was like, my God, this can't just be an interlude. This has to be a record, and it should be a duet. And it's just like a weird thing, I mean, I helped make American Boy later with Estelle and Kanye, and it's, I found Nobody's Supposed to Be Here for Deborah Cox, which ran for number one. It was number one R&B single in the country for 16 weeks, which broke a record. It's like a weird thing. I can't explain it. I can just feel it. And when I feel it, it's real. And I'm like a dog with a bone. I will literally block and tackle whatever I need to do to help that artist cross the finish line. I will do it. I will find the money for you. I will book the studio for you. I will get Kanye to show up. I'll get Puffy to get Mary on this vocal. I will, and when I say anything, let me put an asterisk next to that. Not anything, because there were certain things, which is what the documentary is about, that were off the list. Hello. So that was like the one thing. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But, within like sort of the reason of like just making it possible, giving my artists the scaffolding, the space, the infrastructure, the tools, I would fight for a record if I believed in it, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think one of the beautiful things about where you were coming from, particularly at that time, was that you were creating a new space. And so everything that you did became the foundation of what everyone takes for granted now. And so to understand the impact of that, I think is really important. And I just want to keep emphasizing it, because to be a woman in the music industry is already a challenge. To be a Black woman in the music industry is a challenge. To come into even a legacy genre would be a challenge. But to be crafting a genre with all of that rippling outward of being exceptional speaks to, like, you say your tenacity. You got to have a bulldog living inside you, right alongside, the nurturing mother, because you're mothering your artists. I mean, we all really have to. And so you're investing in them.
That's how I thought of it. Like, these are my children, and I'm going to get these children into, college or whatever, grocery school, whatever it is, I'm going to do that. And yeah, I mean, I did have a tenacity. I think I got it in some ways because I grew up as the child of two politicians in DC, and I had to knock on doors in a styrofoam hat, and people would slam the door in my face, and I'd have to go to the next door, at like 5, and I just kept it moving. Like, okay, I think this is important for the city. I believe my parents are in it for all the right reasons, and I'm gonna just keep knocking on the next door. And the other thing I think of, I've thought about this because people have asked me about the tenacity. I was a rebounder. I played basketball in high school. I had no outside shot, but I could get the rebound. And I would just go up and down for those chip shots, those little bank shots off the back. It was get it in the vicinity. I will get it off the glass, and I will follow your shot, and we will come up with 2. And I will get, fouled, and I will get, my wrist may be jammed, my ankle may be sprained, but I'm going to go up and down in this traffic because we got to walk out of here with the 2. And that's kind of how I looked at making records. Like, if I got banged up, I didn't mind, again, with this one sort of like, I don't mind working hard. I don't mind being scrappy, but I do have like a line that you can't cross. And that was unfortunately the line that 2 men in my career tried to cross.
Yeah. So because we're going to transition into that next, because it's just the natural progression of things, is talking about your career. But I think there is a point that's worth coming back to, which is music is a team sport. And to have that collaborative spirit, and to have the resilience, and to, to be scrappy, but also to not have to take all the glory. Like, you don't have to get the 3-point shot. You just got to get it in the hoop. You got to just take it to the finish line. And I think,
wait, you're buffering or frozen for 1 second.
I think that's something that people don't. So now, by necessity, we've got to talk about On the Record. And there are so many things. So there's obviously the core of it, which I will let you, discuss to whatever extent and in depth that you'd like to. But this, you had two events that really, let's put it honestly, it derailed your path professionally and also as a person, as a human. So I'll let you share as much as you'd like, because I feel it's imperative people watch the documentary. So I don't want them to not tune into that.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, I knew that when I came to New York City at 21 years old in 1992, I'm dating myself, to make rap records, I was getting in, a rough game. I knew that hip hop was not for the faint of heart, and I knew that it was a boys' club. I was prepared for that. I was prepared to have a thick skin, but I didn't understand that I wasn't going to ultimately be judged on the merit of my work. That at the end of the day, if I proved that I had this sort of toughness and the talent, that wouldn't ultimately be enough. I didn't understand rape culture. I didn't understand toxic masculinity. Those were things I didn't get. And so what happened at Def Jam, I answered phones for almost 2 years at three different companies. And then I did publishing briefly at Zomba Music Publishing, where you signed songwriters. I signed Nas to a publishing deal before Illmatic came out, and Eric Sermon. And I finally got my dream job, making rap records for Russell Simmons. I was not going to blow it. I mean, this was the chance. This is why I came to New York. And Russell was a complicated figure for me because he gave me the job. He gave me the shot. He let me make the Mary Meth duet based solely on my idea. He gave me the show soundtrack to put together, which I put together, and it ended up being a platinum album, and we were co-executive producers, and it was the #1 R&B album for, debuted at #1 on the R&B chart and #4 in the pop chart. I mean, he believed in me creatively and professionally. He also was incapable of staying in the professional lane. So he kept muddying the water in terms of our interaction, where at first it started with inappropriate comments, then it turned into sort of inappropriate behavior, so much so that I had to come up with strategies to avoid being alone with him, but also make sure that I had access to him because he was the only one that was giving me anything to do. And I look back at it now, I was 23 and 24, and then I quit shortly after the assault. I just turned 25 a month after the assault. And how exhausting it was, to kind of, in addition to trying to do this job, I had no real teacher. I mean, Russell would give me an opportunity based on my idea and then disappear to the Bowery Bar or to do whatever he did. I didn't socialize with him. I didn't choose to socialize with him. So I wasn't part of his personal life, but I had to interact with him enough to get assignments and feedback. And he was just inappropriate, and it got worse and worse. And one thing that I didn't understand at the time is that predators, I also know now he's a sophisticated predator. He's a serial predator. I didn't know that either. I didn't know that until 2017. They groom you. They throw you off. They do little things. They apologize. And then they are on good behavior for 2 weeks, and then they do something else that's a little bit worse. And what they're doing is they're sort of disorienting you. So you're kind of, what you define as safe and normal gets so reconfigured, and you don't even realize it's happening because it's gradual. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, ultimately, in spite of all of these things that I did to try to avoid putting myself in a compromising situation with him, I just let my guard down. One night, it's in the documentary, I came up to his apartment for what I thought would be 5 minutes. I saw him order me a car. I thought that I was picking up a demo and I would come down and get in this car. That is not what happened. It's in the documentary, and it was deeply traumatic and devastating, and it was terrible. Yeah. I was just crushed by it. I was prepared to give up. I was going to leave New York. I was going to leave the industry. I couldn't, the shame, all of it. How did I fall into that trap? What did I do wrong? All of the stuff that you're not supposed to say to yourself, you say to yourself, the self-loathing. And I really was going to quit altogether, except I had this #1 album. I had the #1 album in the country on the R&B chart. And then the other major labels started to call me, asking me to come in for interviews. And I had to pay my rent. It's not like you get to break your rent just because you're raped. Like, you got rent. Like, my landlord didn't know nothing about that. I had to pay my rent.
Yeah.
And so I quit Def Jam, but I was paying my Stanford student loans. You know, I had a Macy's credit card. I opened up to get some sheets. Like, I got to pay my bills. And so, you know, I got a job at Arista Records working for Clive Davis. And I went into these meetings with this like long face. I was so sad. And Clive really connected with me because he's a music man. And I can now say it because he's out of the closet. He's also gay. And so there was zero toxic energy. It was just two people who loved music. And I found myself laughing because we were playing music and talking about it in this way that was just that joyful way. So I worked for Clive for 4.5 years, and I made a bunch of hit records working with him. I found My Love Is Your Love for Whitney Houston. I found Maria Maria for Carlos Santana. I found A Rose Is Still a Rose for Aretha Franklin. I signed Q-Tip when he put out Vibrant Thing. I signed Brand Nubian. We did a reunion album featuring Loon, who actually is just out. He was locked up for a while. He's out. I'm so happy for Loon. I found Deborah Cox's song, Nobody's Supposed to Be Here. I worked on The Boy Is Mine with Monica and Brandy. I had a great run. It was so much fun, and then Clive was ousted by BMG and replaced by L.A. Reid. And I'd known L.A. Reid since 1993 when I was at Zombie Music Publishing. I crashed Outkast mastering session before anybody had even heard of them because I heard them on a snippet tape. I found out their publishing was available and I wanted to sign Outkast and Organized Noise, their producers, to a pub deal. Snuck into their mastering session where I met L.A. Reid. And he was like, how do you even know about this band? And we became, friendly. I would see him over the years at events when I was at Def Jam and then at Arista, and he always was respectful of me. He would invite me to every mastering session. I was one of the people that insisted No Scrubs was the TLC single. Mm-hmm. So when LA took over, we had such a good rapport creatively. I knew his wife. I really had no reason to believe there were any, red flags. And I also didn't want to sign a 5-year deal with Clive Davis at J Records because I was planning, after my contract at Arista ran out in 18 months, to start a label. I'd already set it up. It was an LLC. It was called Possum. And so I thought, fine, I'll work for L.A. Reid for 18 months. How bad can it be? I'll learn from a different person as I set up my label. And as soon as I kind of burned the bridge with Clive, who was very upset that I didn't go with him, it was like a Devil Wears Prada, Miranda Priestley thing. Like, I was on his list and then I wasn't anymore. He was pissed. So, L.A. Reid basically kind of knew he kind of had me where he wanted me, and it turned into just relentless sexual harassment, and his was different from Russell's. He's not a rapist. He didn't like ambush me and attack me, but he kept basically demanding that I interact with him in a certain way and ultimately meet him in his hotel, which, meet me in my hotel to listen to music. Okay, I know that one. I already know that trick. Yeah. And I just kept blowing him off, and he started to penalize me more and more and more, to the point that it was actually impossible for me to do my job. At which point I was so broken emotionally because I was reduced back to sort of this sex object after having had hits with Whitney, Aretha, Carlos, Tip. I'm like, are we really doing this again? It really doesn't matter what I do. I'm always just going to be, somehow I'm going to find myself back in this corner, and I don't want to be in this corner. So I quit. I went to business school and I got married and I had kids. And I briefly came back to run John Legend's label, and that's when we made American Boy. And then I had to work with all of the Def Jam people because they happened to be the parent company for John's label. And that was demoralizing for me to pretend like it was all good, because it wasn't all good. And I started to become depressed again, having to kiss up to these people that were basically enablers to the rape. Mm-hmm. And I gave up again, and I became a stay-at-home mom for basically 16 years. And then Me Too happened. And then I was like, well, I wasn't going to say anything. And then he called the women who did come forward liars. And I was like, wait a minute now. Wait a minute now.
Yeah.
You must be crazy.
There's like so much there. There's the fact that you had not only to do your job, but you had to contort yourself around people who literally controlled the universe of your professional life in order to do your job and to live and to be safe. And then you endure something that no one should really have to endure. It's not acknowledged. There are no repercussions. You're the one who's left holding the mess. You then pick yourself up, drag yourself into a new situation. It seems okay. Rug pulled out from under you again. I mean, anyone who has gone through any of that would certainly run for the hills, most likely with their hair on fire, screaming. You know what I mean? So, I think no one would ever say anything but, of course, to your response to that situation. And I'm so terribly devastated for you. And it should never have happened. It's unjust. It's wrong. I know enough about these two gentlemen from my work in the music industry, which I'm still in, almost 26. Oh my God. Anyway, long time on. So, when Me Too happened, and I think the only thing that we could compare it to in the community, the Black community, would be similar to what happened, and it's still ongoing with R. Kelly and a couple of the other Black music artists who everyone knew what they were up to. Everyone knew what they were up to, and you touch on this in the documentary, there's a certain obligation to the culture and to the community to try and keep your mouth shut about it, because you don't want to pile on, you don't want to contribute to the negative characterization of the Black community, especially in music, because it's such an easy target. And that's a burden that you then have to bear personally. And it's absolutely wrong. The other thing is that when, anyone who's been through any kind of trauma, and I always hesitate to use the word victim, because in the moment you're victimized and you're enduringly victimized, but you are a survivor of it, right?
I'm a victim too, though, because to me, survivor means I don't have compassion for the part of myself that's really wounded. And
Sure.
It's like, I'm a survivor. I don't have time for that weakling who's like still ashamed and sad and was really, really hurt. It's almost like I'm so trying to move past her that I really do. I am a victim. I was harmed.
Yeah.
And I'm a survivor because I'm still here.
Well, and I don't. And do you? And I think that I don't think anyone ever moves past. You kind of integrate it, right? It becomes integrated into the very fiber of who you are. And you said in the documentary, you are a living crime scene, and anyone who's been through trauma, you feel that so viscerally. That was one of the moments when I was watching that I was, and I got to tell you. I really was avoiding the documentary because it was too close and because I could relate too much. And I'm so glad that I watched it, because it really was, I think it was really affirming to not only see how it's okay to be human and it's okay to allow this to affect you and to acknowledge that. And that you found, ironically, community amongst the other victims. And how meaningful that was for you. And I also find it really ironic, because I'm also a parent. Mm-hmm. Running away to be a stay-at-home mom is like running from one battlefield to another.
No matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah, so lest anyone think that suddenly you were taking an easier job, not at all. And being married and raising children, that's like a whole other battlefield.
A whole new war zone of a different kind, especially because I hadn't unpacked my trauma.
Sure. And kids will also, they'll bring it out, Well,
this is going to sound crazy, but when I delivered my first child, my daughter, she was crowned for 3.5 hours. I dissociated during childbirth, like sexual survivor trauma, froze. I just bounced. I literally bounced for 3.5 crowned, curls sticking out and everything. They kept showing me her curls in the mirror. And then I overheard them say the word C-section, and they were like debating how to do that when she's half out, half in. And some mother version of myself that never existed before was like, push. And I just pushed her out. But it's like I woke up from the trance. Mm-hmm. But that was sexual trauma. It was like the feeling of childbirth was so intense and vaginal trauma that I absolutely froze for 3.5 hours.
And if anyone who hasn't given birth, the equivalent of that is having a watermelon halfway out of a keyhole
Correct.
on fire for
For
3 hours.
3.5 hours.
That's insane.
That's the trauma.
Oh, that's like breathtaking on its own. Um, I hope your children appreciate you.
My son was 19 minutes, 5 pushes. I was like, oh, I'm coming to play today. I know what this is.
Like,
but
I
yeah.
know what I'm doing. Woo!
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that gives me chills of the not good kind. So okay, so you and I also love that you ran away to Harvard Business School. You know, because take an easy path. Let me go to Harvard Business School.
Right. You know, I was trying to put a good face on it. You know what it is? I didn't want them to know they'd broken me.
Mm.
So I wanted to act like, please. When I was really, it was really a little bit like a suicide. I'm going to be honest with you. I'd spent 10 years in New York City working to achieve my dream. I was a Grammy voter. I had a corner office. I had platinum records on the wall. I came here in 1992. I answered phones for subway fare. My first internship was at Jive Records. My mother was like, that is Jive. They don't even pay you. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I survived on a slice of pizza and a Snapple every day. You know, I started from the bottom and I was here. Like I did it.
Yeah.
And it was taken from me by these two men. And when it happened again with LA, just slightly different contours, but the same just demoralizing objectification. I mean, he told me to wear skirts and heels every day. I started wearing those Birkenstock clogs and jeans every day just to be annoying. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, he's going to hate these, the clogs. I'm going with the clogs, you know? But I didn't want them to know they'd won. And that's part of also like, I think some ways I didn't want to admit to myself that I'd given up. So I was like, I'm going to Harvard Business School. You know what I mean? Like, I'm over it. And I just pretended I didn't care. I mean, and I really did pretend I didn't care for literally like 16 years until even when they were shooting the documentary, they were like, can you get your gold and platinum records? Do you have any pictures of yourself in music industry? I was like, no, they're in storage. I'm not going there. I'm not looking at those. And then I saw the rough cut for the first time in November. It had already been like accepted into Sundance by the time I saw the rough cut. And I saw it and I was like, well, where are my platinum records? Where are the pictures of me with the stars? Like, do you know who I am? They were like, Drew, we told you to get those. So then I went and got them. That's why they're in the movie. Because I just didn't want to write victim into my own autobiography. I just wanted to be like, I did 10 years in the music business and then I went to business school and I'm fine. And looking at what I lost was too painful.
Sure.
And so I didn't listen to the music. And now I'm listening to, I have a playlist on Spotify that one of the PR people at HBO Max made. I can't stop listening to it. I'm like, this is good.
It's
you know,
fabulous.
I like, you know, it's like I helped make every single record on here, or I brought it into the world, or I fought for it, or I believed in it, or I picked it, you know, and I'm just starting now to face what I lost. You know, I really didn't even admit to myself how painful it was. And that's why, again, I keep hanging on to survivor and victim, because I really was harmed. And that's a part of my story.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that I would imagine that doing the documentary was a catharsis in itself, being able to acknowledge who, I mean, it's the death that you delayed, right?
The death I delayed.
You know, so now it's here and you can manage it and you're not being gaslit anymore.
I'm not being gaslit.
Which
I'm
is
not out here cleaning up Russell Simmons' crime scene. I'm not out here picking up L.A. Reid's bloody gloves.
exactly
what I was basically doing for 22 years. I was playing their game. I was cleaning up their crime scene. I'm not doing that anymore. It's so freeing.
Well, I think
talk to you about my life and my career, and I don't have to like think of what I'm supposed to say or not. I just say whatever.
Well, and I think that's like you've liberated yourself, you know, because a lot of what, you know, everyone knows this, I think, intellectually, but it really is a power. It's a power move over you. Yes. And so you've now assumed that back for yourself. Yes. So you can become your own sovereign state.
I am my own sovereign state. I don't need them Whether
Exactly.
I succeed or fail professionally, I've got my truth. I'm not living in the little circle they drew on the ground and told me to stay in there and die in that little circle and never leave that little circle. I stepped out of the circle like, what? I'm
Yeah.
out of, what you gonna do now? I'm out of the circle. I'm walking around. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And it's so freeing. And somebody once asked me at like the last panel I did before COVID shut everything down, after the panel, this woman came up to me and she said, "Are you afraid that you're now always going to be known as the woman who was raped by Russell Simmons?" And I stopped and I said, "You know what? I just realized something. I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I was afraid for 22 years that if I told anybody, that's all anyone would think of. But I just realized in this moment that you think of me that way.
Yeah.
Google may think of me that way, but I don't think of myself that way anymore because I don't think about it anymore. It's
Absolutely.
finally in my rear view mirror. So I don't care if all of Google thinks of me that way. And
Mhm.
everybody who meets me for the rest of my life thinks of me that way. I don't think about having been raped by Russell Simmons as something that defines how I'm going to live my day because
No.
I'm done. So
Well,
that's,
and I can tell you from the cadre of women in music, we don't think of you that way. And I know that, and I was, and I also said to, I was talking to another woman who worked at Sony. We were kind of joking about some insane stories because just for everyone out there, as insane as you think the music business is, it's that, and it's even more absurd and ridiculous. So if you meet any women who are working in the music, just be respectful,
right.
please. Just be respectful because the stuff that we're putting up with would make it. That's the hair is curled. But but no, we were like rejoiced. She was like, "Oh my god, yeah, of course, true." And I was like, "Yeah, it was during that period. I swear it was like we were in some sort of dictatorship where women would just disappear." I
Yes.
mean, I had a head of marketing over at Universal who, from one day to the next, disappeared.
Wow.
I mean, I caught up with her about a decade later, and yeah, she bounced for pretty much the same reason. So know that you're not alone, and I think that one of the things that I found really both challenging and really impressive was that you came forward because there's so many who don't, and you felt the need and you felt the calling to do that. And not only that, but you mentioned you have your light skin privilege that also allowed you to do that. And as a fellow light skinned Black woman, I think that that's something people outside of the Black community don't fully understand, and they don't really get the ramifications of what that all is. But you did the thing that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
You called upon the thing that's hardest and most um, vulnerable in you, and then you also had the wits to acknowledge, oh, I'm going to use this to help the other women who don't have this same privilege, especially knowing that the privilege didn't get you anything.
Right. Well, it's funny. I just reread The Bluest Eye. And
Mm,
I have the bluest eye, and I'm still a survivor of sexual trauma in my career and sexual trauma as a child. So my bluest eye didn't protect me ultimately,
mhm,
but I do believe that I am seeable in the white gaze, in the mainstream gaze, in a way that is completely unfair and completely a function of their centering themselves in the narrative, but I get it.
mhm,
So, because I might be seen and I might be able to get like 15 minutes of a platform, let me hold this space and insist that we expand the lens to include other Russell Simmons survivors. I introduced several other Russell Simmons survivors to the directors once they started filming me. And
mhm,
let's expand the lens further and talk about the transatlantic slave trade. Let's
mhm,
talk about the fact that more than half of the women, and they weren't even women, their average age was 15 in the Middle Passage, were pregnant by the time they got here. We lost our bodily autonomy as Black women and girls the day the Atlantic slave trade began in 1619. And let's talk about that while I
mhm.
have your attention. And the truth is, back to my decision to come forward, it sounds like I was just like so brave, and oops, let me decline this. What happened? Oh, I had a call. Um, I really wasn't going to come forward. I went into the New York Times like on background, like I know all the fancy terms, journalism terms. Now, I wasn't going in on the record. I was going in to just give them a story that could be the impetus for them to continue their investigation if they might find somebody else. Because I was very aware that I didn't want to make the target on the backs of Black men and boys that much bigger by adding fuel to the fire of the predatory, dangerous Black man. Just because Russell's dangerous doesn't mean all of these other Black men and boys need to pay the price, because we have this one headline that could then taint the perception of the mainstream that's already tainted as far as our men and boys are concerned. And that was a very clear call for me when I thought I was the only victim.
Mm.
I was willing to just carry that because I didn't want the narrative to harm our boys and our men. When I realized there were other victims, all of a sudden my thinking changed. And it wasn't about protecting my men and my boys. It was like, well, what about protecting my sisters? What about that part? Well, now it's my sisters and my brothers. And it's really not my brothers because it's the predator, and it's my sisters, and my brothers are innocent. Overwhelmingly. It's just this man over here, right? And so then it was like, well, now I've got to stick up for my sisters. And that's really where I ultimately tipped towards I have to come forward because I can't leave them hanging. And I also felt that, again, if I didn't take this opportunity, understanding that my life is a crime scene and that I've paid a handsome price professionally, I'm essentially nowhere in spite of all my success because it was all erased. I'm still a lot safer than most Black women for so many reasons that have to do with light privilege, but also socioeconomic privilege, academic privilege. I'm very aware that like my worst case scenario is something I can live with. I'm still going to be safe. I may not be my best self, but I have room to take this chance that so many Black women don't have. And I happen to live in this Venn diagram where I know these filmmakers, and I am even being asked to be the subject of a documentary, which is an opportunity that so many Black women who are survivors will never have. So if I don't do it, who will? If I don't do it, will this opportunity ever even come again? Will this moment come again? If I don't get on the Me Too bus and move to the front, I mean, this bus is threatening to leave the station every single day because of the patriarchy for all women.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee this Me Too bus isn't going to like blow a tire at any minute. So I was like, let me get on and let me just get to the front and do this thing. Because, it's the same way I fought for my records and I fought for my artists, and then I took it for the team and didn't tell people about Russell beyond my close friends, but I didn't come forward. When it's about something bigger than me, it's very clear. Yeah. The records were bigger than me. The artists were bigger than me. The decision to come forward was bigger than me. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
A call. I'm so popular.
That's totally fine.
I don't even know how to like block it on my computer. So
that's totally fine. Okay, well, I have like, thank you is all I have to say. Thank you for doing that, because you've made space for more of us, and I appreciate that as a human, as a Black woman, all of that. I'm gonna shift us to something else because I really want you to weigh in on something of epic importance, and that's the new Cardi B Megan Thee Stallion track and video. And I'm asking you this, and it sounds frivolous as a question, and it's not just about do you like it, and it's not just about whether the visuals have any value or whatever. And I have opinions about all of that, but it's also because this is one of those rare moments where you have women, Black women, in the hip hop rap milieu who are declaring themselves a certain kind of way, taking complete control of their image, or as much control as you can exert over your image in this industry, and have unapologetically kind of put themselves out there. And so I would love to get your take on it, because I know it's a lot of controversy.
Right. So I'm going to be full disclosure. I've only seen clips of it. I haven't done the proper sit down. My mom and sister and niece were here until about 20 minutes before this interview started. So I've been with them, and my niece is 8. So I haven't been able to watch WAP in its entirety, other than clips I've seen on Twitter. So I'm going to speak from a place of some degree of ignorance. So I've seen some of the visuals and heard some of the music. You know what? I'm all for women, period, claiming agency over our sexual pleasure on our own terms. And, you know, enjoying sex and being clear about the fact that that's something that we have every right to do, and we don't need their permission, and it's not for their benefit. And, you know, so that's my sort of general view. I would have to spend more time with it, I think, to be more specific. But if we're going to pick a record to pick apart because we have concerns about the way it portrays women, and Black women in particular, as overly sexual, why are we picking the one record that perhaps crosses a line, somebody's line, I don't know whose line, when it's finally the one record made with the agency of the women? I mean, how many other records have been as sexual or more sexual and more in your face, in centering the man's point of view, authored by the man, that we just let slide? I mean, we've been letting those records slide for 20, 30 years. And now all of a sudden, whether we agree or disagree with the imagery and the language and how, you know, specific it is, right? I find it problematic that we're up in arms when the women are the authors of it. I mean, if we're going to talk about all the records that we may consider aggressive or, you know, not whatever, let's talk about all of them. Let's not single this record out, you know? So I think it's much more about controlling women and controlling our bodies and controlling our choices and controlling our sexuality. It's like female genital mutilation. I mean, they just really don't want us to enjoy it. They really don't want us to decide. And so, like, I also just have a huge problem with respectability policing. That's one reason I loved hip hop, is because it wasn't trying to play that respectability politics game that, like, the Cosby Show was playing. And don't get me wrong, I love the Cosby Show, asterisk, 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 next to that now. But
I worked on one of his shows. I was
sidebar.
Yeah, and I was, and I got one of those phone calls like, oh, and I was like, well, I did not. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so don't stop here. Keep making phone calls.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. The respectability.
It's, well, you know, my issue with the respectability politics game, it's like, look, I have a daughter and a son. I have a 15-year-old Black daughter. I have a 13-year-old Black son. And I've had talks with my daughter about how to keep herself safe and talks with my son about how to keep himself safe. Guess what? Neither of those talks really are going to keep either one of them safe. Because no matter what my daughter wears, and no matter what my son does with his hands, if he's in an altercation with the cops, if it's a rapist, it's a rapist. If it's a racist cop or a white vigilante trying to act like a racist cop, my children are at risk. It's not about what we wear. It's not about what Philando Castile or Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd or any of them did with their hands. It's about the systemic racism and the systemic rape culture. And so I don't like the policing of these women, period. Stop policing them. That's their record. Let them have their record.
Absolutely. You know? I could not agree more vehemently. I totally agree. Thank you for that, especially because, and I think you're going to enjoy the video.
Okay.
I think you are. Regardless of whether you love the song or not, it's visually spectacular, and they did it. They
Let
just
them live their best lives.
Oh, I mean,
stop hating.
Oh, I'm just like, unless someone's in my living room trying to beat me up, just live, be happy.
And why is it okay when the men depict the women the exact same way? Nobody had a problem with it then. Now
we know why. Yeah, we know why. All right. All right. So then I know I've kind of gone over, I've taken up a lot of your time, but I want to ask you, well, first I want to say one thing. because you've got a new artist coming out
Yes.
on your label, Ninth Floor. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I thought that by coming forward in the New York Times, I was completely closing the door on any hope of ever making a record at like a professional level, again, which was devastating. It was truly the final death knell for me. And then, it's interesting. So many things have happened in the past 2.5 years that I never would have expected. It's almost like when I stopped trying to write the script, write the rape out of my script, and write around all of these things that I thought would have these negative consequences, the things that I wanted started to come to me because I really just let the universe like do what it would with my life and all of it. I stopped trying to control it. And so quite unexpectedly, I got an email from my kid's preschool teacher. My kids were much older by then, but telling me her daughter had read the article with her and wanted advice. And would I meet with her? And I was sort of like, well, this is a very misguided email because I'm persona non grata. I'm not gonna be able to help this woman. I'm like the kiss of death. But I'm sure her daughter isn't very good anyway. So I'll just take the meeting and it'll be 20 minutes of my life and I'll say something encouraging. Maybe I'll try to redirect her to some more promising career and it'll be over and I really like her mom and that's that. And I went and I was like, oh my God, she is the real deal. She's like the artist I wanted to walk in my door every day I did A&R at Def Jam in Arista. She's like Alanis Morissette meets Alicia Keys. She's like a young Black woman who sings, writes, smashes. Like her sense of composition is insane. Okay. But they're cool. They're not like corny. Like, so it's Alanis-y. And she can play the guitar and she shreds and she plays the piano and she has like a style and a persona. She's like, and she has songs for days. And I was like, oh no, now I have to do this. So, I started a label. I, went on to LegalZoom. I set up a label and I called it Ninth Floor Music because the ninth floor was the floor that I worked on with Clive Davis, which is where I had my best run of hits, where I was the safest. So I was like, let me go back to the ninth floor where things worked really well for me. So that's why it's called Ninth Floor Music. And my secret, I don't know, vision is that one day I'll have an office and it won't be in the ninth floor and everyone will be like, I'm going to the ninth floor and everyone will be confused. And I'm like, that's going to be so cool. But anyway, that's beside the point. And so I've been making music with Ella. She has 3 songs on iTunes and Spotify. One is a song she wrote called Medicine, which is, she actually played for me for the first time in real life. And it's captured in the documentary. So we cut that. My cousin, DJ Khalil, who's dope, produced it. There's another song called Favorite Doll that I wrote. And I co-produced that with Andrea Martin, who was brilliant. And then we did for fun a cover of Rich Girl by Hall & Oates. So that's on there too. And I'm raising money for her album and for my label. So I'm super excited about that. And, making music is like so much fun to me. It's just like, I love it. I can't even put into words. It's like this, so I'm doing it. And I love this artist. I believe in her so much. And I want her to have every opportunity that I couldn't give the artist that I signed when I was part of these machines. I mean, the business model in the music industry, take out sexual harassment and assault. The business model itself is an exploitative model. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of helping this young woman to have a career where I really empower her. Mm-hmm. There's enough to go around, and so she really feels good about this relationship. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, she can go and be the best person and also so I can side-eye anybody. I mean, I don't attract anybody and I wouldn't work with anybody who's janky at all. I would never bring her around anybody like that. And if they seem janky, that's a no for me. I mean, I'm a mom now too, so I definitely come at it with that energy. So I just love that I can protect her both as a person, but also that I can shepherd her growth as an artist and as a young businesswoman, so she can just go out and just do the damn thing. I mean, it's just that's such a joy for me.
I love it. I'm so thrilled. I listened to her tracks actually with my whole family yesterday. We drove up to the beach just to look at it, from outside the window. she's got a stunning voice, and I really, really enjoy she's got a great tone to it. So I expect to hear some really great things from her And I want to congratulate you on your new label. I do expect to someday, hopefully, maybe I'll get invited to the 21st floor to go to the 9th floor.
Oh, I like that we're on a higher floor. I always had this vision we'd be like on 4 or something, and they'd be like, "What did I need to aim high?"
Yeah, you're up
Penthouse
there, all the way at the top.
penthouse.
Absolutely, absolutely.